When a mother's love hurts, 5 signs she might be a narcissist. Have you ever quietly wondered if your mother might be a narcissist? It's a question that pierces the heart because it doesn't just challenge your relationship with her, it challenges your very understanding of love itself. Narcissism, after all, isn't always loud or obvious. It doesn't always come wrapped in cruelty or grandiosity. Sometimes, it wears the softest smile, the kind that makes you doubt your own pain. And when the narcissist is your mother, the person meant to nurture, soothe, and shape you, the damage doesn't vanish with age. It becomes the foundation upon which your sense of self is built, or rather, fractured. Psychologists have long observed that children raised by narcissistic parents often grow into adults who carry invisible wounds of inadequacy. Dr. Carol McBride, a leading expert on narcissistic parenting, describes it as a quiet theft of identity. The child learns that love is conditional, that approval must be earned through compliance, performance, or silence. This dynamic doesn't merely lower self-esteem, it trains you into it. Low self-worth, as therapists often say, is not a defect of personality but a learned survival mechanism. You were taught, perhaps unconsciously, that your value depended on how well you reflected someone else's needs. The psychological imprint of such an upbringing runs deep. Even as an adult, you may find yourself trapped in patterns of self-doubt, people-pleasing, or guilt that make no rational sense. That's because your nervous system was wired in an environment of emotional unpredictability. When love is conditional, safety becomes performance. And when your sense of worth hinges on keeping peace with a volatile or self-absorbed parent, you internalize the idea that your feelings are either too much or don't matter at all. To understand this, we must first understand what narcissism truly is and what it isn't. The term is often thrown around casually, used to describe vanity or arrogance. But psychologists define narcissism, particularly narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, as something far darker and more destructive. It is a profound emotional void masked by an inflated sense of self-importance, a craving for admiration, and an inability to empathize. A narcissist doesn't genuinely love themselves. They love the image they've constructed, the reflection that hides the shame beneath. The roots of this concept stretch back to ancient mythology. Narcissus, the tragic figure from Greek legend, didn't fall in love with himself but with his reflection. He was captivated by the illusion, unable to see the truth beyond the surface. Meanwhile, Echo, the nymph who loved him, was cursed to repeat only his words, never her own. It's a haunting metaphor one psychologists still use today. For children of narcissistic parents, especially mothers, life becomes an endless echo. You exist to reflect her brilliance, her suffering, her story, never your own. You become the mirror she polishes, never the soul she nurtures. Modern psychology identifies 2 primary forms of narcissism: grandiose and vulnerable, or covert. Both are devastating in different ways. The grandiose narcissist is the classic performer, the center of every stage, the self-proclaimed authority on everything. Think of the parent who demands admiration as if it were oxygen. They often treat their children as supporting characters in their personal drama, props to enhance their image. Dr. Ramani Durvasula calls this the applause dynamic, where the child's only value is in how well they sustain the parent's ego. Love becomes transactional. The more you feed their need for validation, the more you are temporarily loved. But the vulnerable narcissist, the covert one, is trickier to recognize. They cloak manipulation in fragility. They might present as the wounded martyr, perpetually anxious, misunderstood, or self-sacrificing. They use guilt as their weapon and weakness as their stage. Psychologists describe them as emotional black holes. They pull empathy from everyone around them, especially their children, while giving none in return. Picture Mother Got Hell from Tangled. The mother who claims to love her child but only for the reflection of youth and adoration that child provides. In both cases, the emotional roles are inverted. The parent becomes the needy one, and the child becomes the caretaker, the regulator of the household's emotional climate. This reversal, what family therapists call parentification, forces a child to abandon their own needs too soon. You learn that expressing pain is dangerous, that disagreement equals rejection, and that silence is the only safe way to survive. Over time, your identity becomes shaped not by authenticity but by adaptation. Dr. Lindsay Gibson, author of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, explains that such children often grow into adults who confuse anxiety with love. They seek relationships that replicate the same imbalance, gravitating toward people who need saving or validation, rather than those who offer stability. It's not weakness, it's conditioning. Your nervous system was programmed to equate intensity with affection. But healing is possible. Recovery begins with recognition, the quiet, painful acknowledgement that what you experienced was not love, but control disguised as care. Psychologists recommend reparenting practices, where you begin to give yourself the compassion, patience, and validation that were once withheld. Setting boundaries may feel cruel at first, but as trauma experts like Dr. Nicole Lepper emphasize, boundaries are not rejection, they are repair. They reteach your body what safety feels like. Over time, you learn that being the echo was never your destiny. You were not born to mirror someone else's brokenness. You were meant to have a voice, to exist in your own right, to see your own reflection not as something to serve others, but as something sacred. And that's the truest act of defiance against a narcissistic mother. Not hate, not revenge, but freedom, the quiet kind that comes from finally recognizing that the reflection in the mirror has always been yours. Narcissistic fathers, as psychologists often point out, tend to exhibit a hot and cold attachment style. Their affection is strategic, not spontaneous, offered when it benefits their ego and withdrawn when it doesn't. To them, children are instruments, not individuals. They view their offspring as useful extensions of their own narrative when those children bring pride, admiration, or convenience. But when they fail to serve that purpose, the father's emotional presence vanishes as if the child no longer exists. This inconsistency breeds insecurity and hypervigilance, shaping children who learn to chase affection through performance rather than authenticity. Narcissistic mothers, however, operate in a subtler, more consuming way. Where the father's love may flicker, the mother's influence seeps into the very identity of the child. Psychologists refer to this as enmeshment, a psychological merger where the mother sees no separation between herself and her child. The child is not a person with their own emotions and desires but a reflection, a mirror designed to reinforce her illusion of perfection. Every smile, achievement, or failure is absorbed into her self-concept. She doesn't nurture her child's individuality. She molds them to become her living echo. For daughters, this emotional architecture is particularly insidious. A narcissistic mother positions her daughter as both a prized possession and a rival. She wants her to be beautiful, graceful, and successful, but only within limits that maintain maternal dominance. Psychologist Dr. Carol McBride calls this the daughter's double bind. You are expected to shine just enough to elevate your mother's image, but never enough to cast a shadow on her. She might compliment you one moment and criticize you the next, leaving you perpetually uncertain of your worth. Over time, this trains the daughter to regulate her brightness, to dim her light to preserve her mother's comfort. The resulting emotional residue is often deep shame, self-doubt, and a chronic fear of outshining others. For sons, the dynamic transforms into something psychologists term covert emotional incest, a non-physical but profoundly invasive bond. The narcissistic mother often elevates her son into the role of a surrogate husband, grooming him to meet her emotional and psychological needs. She demands loyalty, adoration, and protection, subtly ensuring he sees her as the ideal woman, the fairest of them all. This, as family therapists explain, interrupts the son's natural individuation process. He grows up learning that his emotional worth comes from serving her, not from discovering himself. As an adult, this may manifest as guilt when trying to love another woman or as a persistent tendency to seek emotionally unavailable partners, unconsciously reenacting the original dynamic. Sign number 1. You believe you are responsible for other people's happiness. This is one of the most common scars left by a narcissistic parent. From an early age, you were trained to associate love with service. Every smile you brought to your mother's face, every problem you solved for her, became the currency of belonging. Psychologists identify this as conditional love imprinting, where a child's nervous system learns that safety and affection are earned, not freely given. As adults, survivors of narcissistic parenting often become chronic caretakers, people-pleasers, or apologizers. You say, "I'm sorry," even when you've done nothing wrong because, in your subconscious, apology equals survival. This conditioning also makes survivors magnetic to new narcissists. As Dr. Ramani Durvasula notes, children of narcissists often unconsciously recreate familiar emotional environments. They date, befriend, and even marry narcissists because the dynamic, though painful, feels like home. It's what the brain recognizes as love. The path to healing, psychologists emphasize, begins with boundary reconstruction. Learning that your empathy is a gift, not an obligation. Reclaiming your autonomy means understanding that someone else's mood, happiness, or comfort is not your responsibility. Sign number 2. You struggle to trust yourself. Being raised by a narcissistic mother means growing up in an environment of chronic gaslighting. You were taught that her version of reality was absolute and that your perceptions were flawed, exaggerated, or selfish. Over time, your internal compass eroded. Psychologists call this self-doubt conditioning, a systematic dismantling of your trust in your own senses. As a result, even in adulthood, you second-guess your intuition, downplay your pain, or hesitate to speak your truth. This psychological confusion isn't weakness. It's the natural outcome of years spent being told that your feelings were invalid. Survivors often report an internal split. One part senses that something is wrong, while another fears punishment for believing it. The healing process requires reality reorientation, a therapeutic approach that involves rebuilding trust in one's perceptions. Through journaling, therapy, or support groups, victims learn to separate their authentic voice from the implanted one that whispers, "You're overreacting." Sign number 3. You believe you are not enough. Perhaps the deepest wound of all. Narcissistic mothers, being emotionally hollow themselves, cannot provide genuine love or validation. Instead, they siphon admiration from others to fill the void inside them. When a child serves as that mirror, love becomes unattainable, a prize always just out of reach. Psychologists describe this as the endless chase for approval, an internalized drive to earn validation from people who will never truly give it. Growing up under these conditions leaves you trapped in a perpetual cycle of inadequacy. You hide your flaws, mask your pain, and overperform just to feel momentarily worthy. But even perfection isn't enough, because the goalpost constantly moves. As Dr. Lindsay Gibson explains, children of emotionally immature parents often mistake emotional exhaustion for love. You were conditioned to work for affection, not receive it. The antidote is radical self-compassion, learning to become your own source of validation. Healing begins when you stop echoing the reflection and start recognizing your own face in the mirror. From the very beginning, you were trained to believe that you were never enough, not by accident but by emotional design. A narcissistic mother's love is a performance, not a promise. She conditions her child to exist as a source of endless validation, a living stream of admiration feeding a hunger that can never be satisfied. Psychologists describe this as narcissistic supply addiction, a cycle in which the narcissist feeds off others' attention to maintain their fragile self-image. For a child trapped in this cycle, love becomes labor. Every moment of approval is fleeting, unpredictable, and followed by rejection just sharp enough to keep you chasing the next crumb. True self-worth, psychologists remind us, requires the development of a separate self, an identity distinct from one's caregivers. But a narcissistic mother has neither the emotional generosity nor the psychological maturity to allow her child that autonomy. To her, your independence feels like betrayal. She cannot love you as an individual. She can only love the reflection of herself she sees in you. When you excel or shine, she basks in your success as if it were her own. But if you falter or express needs that disrupt her idealized image, she recoils in disgust or rage. This erratic pattern of affection and punishment creates what developmental psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, a conditioning process that keeps children emotionally hooked, desperately trying to earn consistent love that will never come. The cruel paradox is that anything beautiful about you, your talents, your looks, your charm, is claimed as her creation, her proof of greatness. But anything flawed becomes your fault. This emotional double standard rewires your inner world. You learn to associate your worth with performance and perfection, and to feel shame whenever you fall short. Over time, you internalize her distorted logic. I am lovable only when I am flawless. Dr. Lindsay Gibson calls this toxic idealization, where the parent's fantasy replaces the child's reality. It's why so many adult children of narcissists live haunted by an invisible image, a better, brighter, more perfect version of themselves that they can never fully become. For most people, the idea of becoming better can be motivating. But for children of narcissists, that same drive is tormenting. The reflection, the fantasy self, becomes more real than the living, breathing person underneath. Psychologists note that this is a form of self-alienation. You stop recognizing who you truly are and begin chasing an illusion of worthiness. The result is chronic inadequacy, a gnawing conviction that you must hide your flaws to deserve love. Healing begins when survivors learn to dismantle this inner fantasy, to replace self-criticism with compassion, and to accept that humanity, not perfection, is what makes one worthy of love. Sign number 4. You believe you are a burden. When your mother's universe revolved around herself, your needs became an inconvenience, an interruption. Emotional neglect, psychologists explain, doesn't always come from absence. It often comes from self-absorption. A narcissistic mother's attention is monopolized by her own desires and dramas, leaving no space for her child's emotions to exist. If you were hungry, she fed you to silence you, not to comfort you. If you cried, she dismissed you, not because she didn't hear you, but because your pain threatened to pull focus from her own reflection. Over time, you learned the lesson. My needs cause distress. This conditioning shapes adults who carry deep guilt for existing. You may feel apologetic for expressing emotions, embarrassed to ask for help, or fearful of being seen as too much. Psychologists call this internalized shame schema, a mental blueprint that tells you your very needs are a burden. In relationships, it manifests as overcompensation. You take care of others, suppress your own discomfort, and strive to be endlessly low maintenance. Healing requires radical unlearning, understanding that needing care doesn't make you weak or selfish. As Dr. Nicole Lepper notes, the inner child does not stop needing. It simply hides those needs until it feels safe again. The task now is to create that safety within yourself, to become the caregiver you were denied. Sign number 5. You struggle with boundaries and feel guilty for setting them. Boundaries are foreign territory for the children of narcissists. In a healthy family, boundaries teach respect and individuality, but a narcissistic mother interprets them as defiance. Psychologists describe narcissistic entitlement as the belief that others exist to serve my comfort. To her, your boundaries are not expressions of self-protection. They are acts of betrayal. Her ego cannot tolerate the idea that you might be separate, autonomous, or unwilling to serve. When you say no, she hears rejection. When you distance yourself, she feels abandonment. And rather than reflect on her behavior, she retaliates with guilt, manipulation, or rage to restore control. This dynamic echoes the myth of Narcissus and Echo. Echo's only role was to repeat what Narcissus said, to mirror him, to never disrupt his illusion. Imagine, for a moment, if Echo had stopped echoing, if she had spoken her own words or disturbed the reflection in the water. That's what happens when you set a boundary with a narcissist. You threaten their illusion of control. Their fury isn't personal. It's psychological. As Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains, narcissists experience boundaries as narcissistic injury, a direct assault on their fragile sense of superiority. And yet, reclaiming your boundaries is the cornerstone of recovery. It begins with tolerating the guilt that was never truly yours. The narcissistic mother trained you to feel rude, selfish, or cruel for asserting yourself, but that guilt is a ghost, a residue of her conditioning. Psychologists encourage survivors to practice boundary exposure therapy. Small, consistent acts of self-assertion until your nervous system learns that protecting yourself doesn't equal danger. Remember, empathy is your strength, but without boundaries, it becomes a weapon that can be used against you. If you were raised by a narcissistic mother, It's no coincidence that you may have drawn similar women into your adult life. Friends, colleagues, or partners who replicate her patterns of charm, dominance, and control. Trauma repetition, psychologists say, is not a choice. It's the psyche's attempt to rewrite its story. Healing happens not when you avoid these patterns, but when you finally recognize them for what they are, illusions of love that demand your silence. And when you stop echoing, when you find your own voice, the spell breaks.